Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Bodhi Buddhism Community for Class 3 of our fourth course on Buddhist psychology. So welcome along, everyone. My name's Matt. I'm tuning in here from Taiwan, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning on my side. I don't know where you're at or where you're tuning in from, but if you're watching now, please just leave a little message, drop a little hi or a little smiley or something in the the little Facebook message box, just to let me know that you're tuning in. So, as we've just said, today is the third class for this course on Buddhism, Buddhist psychology. So we're going to kind of just be continuing on from last week. So we'll start off today with a little bit of a kind of a very simple refresher, a little reminder on what we covered last week, and then we'll get into our specific content for today. And remember, of course, that all of our classes, all of our sessions end with a little bit of meditation time. So it's like 9 o'clock now, and we'll go into probably a little bit before 10 o'clock on my side, and we'll do some stretches because we've just sort of been sitting here for like 50 minutes or so. We'll do some stretches, and then we're going to have some sitting meditation time, maybe about 20 minutes or so, and then that leaves us with about 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. Okay, I see we've already got some people dropping the comments there. Mika, good morning to you too. Jaylee Lee, good morning as well. And Suk In Wan, I am probably not pronouncing your name correctly, my apologies. Welcome along as well. I don't think we've seen your comments here. Maybe it's the first time that you're tuning in, or maybe you have been stalking some of the earlier classes. Whatever the case, that's fine. Good to see you. Welcome along. If there's anyone else out there, please just drop a message in. I'm sure some of the other regulars are out there and tuning in as well. Okay, so where to from here? Let's get ready to jump on into a bit of a refresher on what we covered last week. Okay, so I need to cut screens, cut over to this little kind of PowerPointy screen here. Buddhist psychology. Now, just a little reminder of where we are like today. Today's like week 3 here. So what we did in the first week is we talked very simply about just even the way in which we think about the mind or the body-mind and the relationship in Buddhism, and also some other different world philosophies, science, some other religious traditions. We talked a little bit also about the 5 aggregates as a very standard Buddhist way of breaking down kind of an individual person. Usually it's people. It could even be like animals, for example. Some other kinds of living creatures in Buddhism, the 5 aggregate system might not work the best. But for us, I'm assuming you tuning in, you're a human being, not some other kind of life form. That the 5 aggregates is a really simple, but also very effective way of breaking down who we are into sort of component parts and looking at that in a certain light. And then week 2, so that was last week, we talked about the process of sense perception, and we had that little funky little diagram, little animated diagram there in PowerPoint, all the steps from our sense organs and sense objects, and how from that we have like a sense cognition, like we're aware of something, we can see something or hear something, smell, taste, touch something, and then this in turn brings about different feelings or sensations. It might be pleasant, unpleasant, or neither nor, neutral. Different thoughts or ideas might come up with respect to that object, and then we might have some different responses internally first, so like emotional responses, and then they in turn may lead to different actions of the body, and that kind of then provides this whole like feedback loop. So today we're getting into afflictive emotions and views. And that's just really building on what we did last week. So with that kind of model of sense perception in mind, how are we going to build on that? So let's start to move into that now. Okay, now I'm just going to zip back and see if We've got we've got a few other people, a few more people tuning in there. GW, good morning as well. Good to see you too. So we've got a few people tuning in live. Okay, so active afflictions are this week's kind of topic. Now, let's just talk about these first. In a moment, I'll kind of, like on this little PowerPoint, we'll go also into like a little schematic diagram. It kind of builds on last week's stuff, but let's just kind of talk about some concepts here. So the first one is that due to various different types of stimuli, we have afflictions. So we're going to talk about what afflictions are in a second. And this kind of process can be likened to like a seed that sprouts. And this is a real common metaphor that's used in early Buddhism and like right up to mid-period Buddhism. This idea that that we have seeds in the mind, these potentials within the mind for certain types of mental response, and like any seeds, they require some conditions for those seeds to sprout and grow. So just like a seed, you get water, you get springtime, temperature's a bit warmer, the seed will begin to sprout, right? Puts down the root and then pops up out of the soil. So likewise, in our minds, we've got these potentials, and normally we can't see them, just like you can't see a seed within the soil. But then with various external stimuli, and this really is, the kinds of stimuli that we were talking about last week. So you've got different objects, right? You see different things, hear, smell, taste, touch different things. These can sort of evoke these seeds to sprout. These can evoke different emotional responses from us. And so you've kind of got this distinction. When the seed is, like if you imagine a seed, so like in the autumn, in the fall, and then the fruit or the flower like dies and the seed drops onto the ground, and maybe it's like really cold winter, so it's like the ground's all frozen over and covered with like snow or frost or ice. The seed doesn't sprout, right? It's not warm enough, and it lies dormant there in the soil. And then by springtime, it warms up, the ice or the snow melts, the moisture soaks into the seed and it begins to sprout. And then only when it sprouts and it pops up out of the soil, you can see like, oh, okay, there was a seed there. But before it sprouts, we kind of usually can't see it. And so our afflictions are a bit like that. We've all got like a lot of these potentials. People in general have the potential to do all sorts of things, but we usually don't. However, under certain circumstances, that may happen, and that kind of behavior may happen. Now, this kind of idea, not everyone will necessarily like this idea, to be honest. Let's just pop back here. Not everyone particularly likes this idea. And let me give like an example. Now, it may seem like quite an extreme example, but when you think about it, actually, it's not necessarily that extreme. I don't know if any of you have heard of this Stanford experiment. So this was an experiment that took place, I believe, at Stanford University. It was in this like psychology department. I think they were studying like authoritarianism. They basically they got different volunteers to come in. They divide them into two groups. One group were prisoners. One group were kind of like the prison guards, police. And they were kind of, it's kind of like role playing. But what happened with the role playing is like the people doing the role playing, they're really, the role takes over the actor. Like it became not role playing. They started to act and behave in ways that were kind of outside the script of what was supposed to happen for the experiment. The guards became like incredibly authoritarian and repressive and cruel, and the prisoners also kind of got into that like sort of victim mentality. And it was really quite horrible what happened. They called off the experiment early on, partly because it was just getting so out of control. But when they thought about it afterwards, it's like, well, how could that happen? These were just like normal people that they kind of got off the street. But it shows the potential once people are put into that situation, they're given roles, and then all the things around them are stimulating certain responses. They can act like in those kinds of ways. Now, another example, again, that may seem more extreme, people talk about like sort of Nazi Germany. It's not that, well, it was all Hitler's fault. But that, of course, overlooks the fact that there were hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that were following him and following out his orders and that kind of leadership. And so, it was this whole like shaping of society. And people that would otherwise not behave in certain ways did behave in those kinds of ways. So why? So from a Buddhist point of view, we say people do have those potentials. We've got the potentials to do all sorts of really horrible things. And we can also add, I've got to add, and can also do very like amazing and wonderful things. We also have potential to do really amazing things, acts of generosity and kindness and self-sacrifice that we might not normally think of, but how to bring out those potentials. And so a lot of that's to do with what I've just mentioned there, the stimuli, what's going on around us, this whole environment that we're in. Okay, I see we've got a few more people tuning in there. As I said, GW, we've got Terry there. Hi, Terry. Good to see you. We've got Jonathan and we've got Meifang. Good to see you all tuning in. And Tia as well. Long time no see, Tia. Hope you're doing well. Comment from Mika. Okay, the Stanford experiment has been proven to be falsified with its results. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. So what happened? Maybe they tried to replicate it and it did not happen at the time. Then maybe there's still the question. So why did it happen at that time? And there is also the other examples that we see in society. People that often seem to behave in seem like regular ordinary people. Why did they go crazy? Or why did these regular ordinary people suddenly become heroes? Okay. So we have this potential. That's my main point. Okay, and Mark is tuning in. Long time no see, Mark. I hope things are going well with you. You seem to be very busy lately. I guess you're getting ready for the start of term very soon. Okay. Okay, let's go back to our PowerPoint there. Where were we? PowerPoint. Okay, so the potentials and then bringing out those potentials. Now, when it comes to doing about afflictions, and so when we're talking about these potentials and these potentials coming up and manifesting, when it's not only afflictions, but of course for Buddhism, this case of afflictions is really important. So you talk about the Four Noble Truths or the Four Holy Truths of Buddhism. There is dissatisfaction, there is a cause of dissatisfaction, there is an end of dissatisfaction, so nirvana or liberation, and there's the path. There's a path to the end of dissatisfaction. So let's just look at these first two. Dissatisfaction, so it's like bad existential state. And the cause, the reason, the origin or the source of these afflictions, of this dissatisfaction is afflictive states of mind. Okay, so what are they and where do they come from? So in general, we can, there's lots of different ways of classifying these afflictions. The simplest way is to use a threefold classification, or one of the simplest ways. Basically to say that desire, aversion, and ignorance are our three core afflictions. And here I'm basically saying these are also emotions as well. Now, the case of, is ignorance an emotion? We're kind of going to get to that in a second. But let's say at least desire and aversion are emotions. And just think of it literally like emotion. It's something that makes us move, right? Emotions. Things that like create emotion, a movement. Desire is a movement towards. Aversion is a movement away. It's really simple. Like I like to think of it in this way. Desire towards, desire away. And also ignorance as well, when we're not understanding and then we're responding to something, we're having an emotional response to something which is totally inappropriate for what that thing is. Now, because these states like kind of harass and afflict us, we call them afflictions or defilements. When we have those states, that desire, that aversion, and there are lots of other different afflictions, the mind is not at peace. The mind is not calm. And so that's, like a real just kind of a basic line idea of what is meant by an affliction or a defilement. Or the mind is also not clear. So when we're seeing something through the eyes of desire, it's like rose-colored glasses, right? So the way we say, oh, it's all wonderful, it's all perfect and good. We look at all the good things that we like, we ignore all the things that we don't like. We're not seeing it as it really is. And again, that's a kind of a blurring of our vision, a blurring of our understanding. It means we're not seeing things correctly or accurately. And then we're going to respond in it in a way that's going to be problematic. Now, in terms of the emotional side, let's look first of all at these basic two, desire and aversion. So desire is basically towards pleasant things. When we have sensations or feelings that are pleasant, we typically have desire towards them. And when we, I'm sorry, I'm going to sneeze. And when we have unpleasant feelings or sensations, my apologies, we have aversion towards them. Okay, so these are our two basic, what I'm going to call in the emotional category of afflictions. Desire towards the pleasant and aversion away from the unpleasant. So, just you can easily think of an example for that, right? Walking down the street, you see, you see a Ferrari drive past, and it's like, maybe you're in the car, so wow, nice Ferrari. You have a look at it, right? Desire towards it. Wow, if I had a Ferrari, how cool would that be? Desire towards something regarded as pleasant. Of course, it wouldn't just be what it looks like. You'd have all sorts of ideas. Oh, if I had a Ferrari, people would think I'm cool. I'd be popular. These are all, they all build on each other, right? Anyways, for aversion, you're walking down the street and you see somebody's taking their dog for a walk and hasn't cleaned up after them, and you're like, oh, that's disgusting, right? Oh, the smell. Oh, I almost stepped in that. Just, you move away from it. Literally, you move away from that little doggy package on the sidewalk as aversion. Unpleasant, aversion. Get away from it. So these two are the basic kind of poles of the emotional side for these kind of really basic emotional afflictions. But we also have another category as well. We have afflictions that are in terms of ideas or concepts. And so this comes about from our ways of understanding things. This isn't so much an emotional response, but it's the way in which we conceptualize things. And here in particular, we construct these views around me, around I, right? We're always looking at things in terms of me. This is me, this is mine, this is I, or this is my soul would be the kind of the original textual way of talking about it. And then when we're looking at things, we're responding to things, we're classifying things, conceptualizing things in terms of me. And that can also be a really fundamental root of these afflictions. Okay, so far we're just throwing out some basic ideas, basically saying these afflictions are potentials within the mind. When we have different types of stimuli from outside, things we hear and see and smell and taste and touch, and of course they're not just individual, like I see this thing or I hear this thing. This whole environment creates, it's kind of like a synergetic effect. It's not just the power of one thing or two things. It builds up until that's our whole world that we're in, right? And then these stimulate these emotional responses from us, particularly aversion and desire, and also intellectual or conceptualized views about the world in terms of self. So far so good? Let me zip back to our... Okay, no comments so far. You're either following along or you have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay, Escobar, nice to see you tuning in there. Welcome along. Okay, just remember, if you've got any comments along the way, just throw in the comments. It seems that I'm back to the usual comment section today. Like I think last week or the week before, the comment section was weird. It would only give me like about 5 comments, and then if there were more comments, the other ones would disappear off the top, and I kind of couldn't keep up with them sometimes. It seems to be back to the original one now. Like there's like a usual stream of comments. So as I'm talking, if you've got any thoughts, throw them in there. I will kind of regularly come back and check on the comments as I go, because I just want to make sure that you're kind of following along. Okay, So let's just zip on ahead. Now let's go back and kind of look at that in terms of that. Remember that little model, that little graphic we used last week? And we're going to build on that. So, right, we got sense organs. So how many we got? We got like 6 sense organs. All right, I do this. This is Chinese for 6, okay? 5 external. Our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. And then the 6th organ is the mind. Right, so the mind is considered an organ. The objects that these organs take are things we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and also for the mind, it is things that we can, think of. And that doesn't just mean thinking in terms of like thoughts using words and language. If I imagine something, I can picture something, I can recollect a memory, I can recollect taste of something. All of these things are mental objects. They're not in the external world, but they're stored as like images within the mind. So there's our sense organs and our sense objects. Largely these are material. So for the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, they are material, and it can also include the mind as well. And over time, when we have the organ and the object, we have cognition. So right now I'm looking at the camera and I can literally, I can see. So I am seeing. And then after the cognition, well, I need to have the cognition before I can have the next step. I'm going to have a sensation, right? So we talked about this last week. Sensations might be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. 3 basic types. Now, as we've just mentioned, based on these sensations, we may have this kind of emotional response, right? Pleasant sensation may lead to desire. Unpleasant sensation, pain, may lead to aversion. Now, this desire and aversion is already an emotion. That's already, remember, a volition. We talked about the 5 aggregates. Over here, the matter is like the rupa, the form, the material form aggregate. Cognition is the 5th aggregate. Sensation, right, is the 2nd aggregate. And then this desire and aversion is our 4th aggregate. That's our volition or our karma. It's our karma if we have desire to something or aversion. That is a type of mental karma. And it doesn't stop there. After this sensation, we might also have some kind of perception, the way we see something, right? Oh, that's a cup. That's a Ferrari. That's, that's a delicious vegan pizza. That was our example last week. Now, based on these perceptions, so remember the perceptions use like words and language to kind of label things and conceptualize things. It's, again, possible that we might then start conceptualizing this object in terms of me, mine, and I. Or, in simple terms, start conceptualizing it with respect to myself in some way. Now, when I say that, okay, now both of these, both this desire and aversion, well, I mean, it's not just desire or aversion or anything in that category, or also this conceptualizing into me, mine, and I, all of these are actually within the scope of our intentions. I'm going to line these up here. These are already types of intentions, or volition, or mental karma. Now, when I said that we may have desire and aversion, or we may have this kind of self-centered conceptualizing, I do want to emphasize the may. It's not that like it must happen. No, there's this possibility that we don't have that. But most of the time we do have that kind of response. Okay, very commonly, and in fact, and I think I mentioned this last time, these things are so common that often it's very difficult for us to differentiate between like a pleasant sensation and desire, for example, because like it's such an immediate kind of reaction. Likewise, when we perceive things, when I look, this is a laptop computer in front of me. I don't just see this as a computer. I see this as my computer. This is my laptop. And like I almost cannot help seeing this laptop as my laptop, because I've already bound in that concept of me and I, and that's a self-centered like labeling of this object with the perception of this particular computer. It's very difficult for me to differentiate. If I was to see a computer, maybe I go to the library, I take my laptop and I set it down, and somebody sits next to me and they've got exactly the same laptop. I might I get up and go to the bathroom, I come back and I see them picking up the laptop and walking away. I might think, hey, they're stealing my computer, right? It's very hard for me to differentiate between what I'm seeing, just literally this shape and form, and it's a laptop, and it's my laptop. Totally intertwined together. Right? So this is the thing we're focusing on today. From sensations, the possibility of desire and aversion, emotional afflictions, and from perceptions, the possibility of conceptualizing that object in terms of me and mine, in terms of self, which is our affliction of what we call views. And we could also put that a certain part of ignorance as well. And then, of course, with whichever type of these intentions that we have, be it desire, aversion, be it self-centered views, these in turn lead to physical and verbal actions, and these go and feed back into our senses, right, and back into our sense objects as well. In other words, our physical and verbal actions are, because they're external, they're in the external world, to do with the physical body and the physical world, they can reorient our senses, they can reorient objects, and then this whole process kind of begins again. We're constantly going through this cycle again and again. So, for example, if we basically have some pleasant object, we have desire with respect to it, then our physical verbal actions will tend to be actions that draw ourselves closer to the object, because we think we're going to get more of that pleasant feeling from it. And if, for example, we have a self-centered view, it will also kind of try to bring that object close to me and associate it with me stronger. Make sure nothing disconnects that object from my sense of self. Or if we have aversion, an unpleasant sensation, and we have aversion for it, the physical and verbal actions will try to remove ourselves from it, right? You see someone you really don't like, really kind of do not like that person, really drive you crazy. You might see them from a distance and I'm going to turn down the side street here, right? And then we go down the side street, we can't see them, they can't see us. We think it's successfully cut off the source of our unpleasant sensation. Okay, so far so good. Let me come back here. Have we got any comments so far? How is your thinking about this? Okay, no comments coming through. Everything is as clear as mud. Okay. Okay, so that's some of these ideas. We're kind of, like I said, we're building up on last week, which was to say we've got our senses. So I think the simplest example is like our eyes. We can see objects. So let's pretend I've got eyes in the back of my head and I can see this tanka of Shakyamuni Buddha sitting behind me. Oh, you can see it. So I'll just use it as an example. Maybe I should shift over more so you can see it. Okay, I'll just shimmy over a bit and you can see the picture better. So you've got your senses, you've got your eyes are open, your computer's on, we've got this internet, so it's created this image which includes this picture of Shakyamuni Buddha on your screen. You're close enough to the screen to see it. Maybe there's nothing blocking your eyesight and the screen. So you see the object and you might then have some kind of, so you can see it, there's first some cognition. And then you might have some kind of sensation when you see it. Now I really love this style of Buddhist iconography. The Tibetan forms, which are kind of largely from the Indian forms, they're very formalized. All the proportions of the images, the head size, shoulder width, waist width, legs, position of the arms, and so on. They were very, very well developed kind of technology of drawing these images. And then the other things that go around it, says there's the kind of the halo, there's the lotus flower, there's the image of the disciples to the sides, and so forth. I find this very pleasant. Okay, I find this very pleasant. So when I'm going somewhere, and if I walked into somebody's house, into a shop, for example, and I see this and it's a pleasant sensation, I'll probably look at it longer, right? So that is, what am I doing when I'm looking at it longer? I am having desire, right? There's a desire for that pleasant thing. I'm feeling that I'm looking at it and it feels good. And we like that. There might also be some other ones as well, some of the intellectual side of it as well. I might think that I'm a Buddhist, therefore there might be some thoughts related to that. I'm a Buddhist and I'm seeing this and I should look at it. Maybe when I'm looking at it, somebody comes in and they rip this off the wall and they're going to like rip it in half. I'm also going to respond in a certain way to that. I'm going to think, I'm a Buddhist and that's a sacred object. Like as far as our eyes are concerned, this is just an object. It's got various different colors and various different shapes. It's kind of two-dimensional. But we conceptualize this in our mind as like it's an image of the Buddha. And then we conceptualize the idea of the Buddha as kind of like this, a sacred or a holy image or a holy object. And then if I think that I'm a Buddhist and somebody destroys this, I'm going to like, hey, you can't do that, tackle them to the floor, save the tanka. Oh, Buddha, I've saved you. There's a lot going on, huh? Now, this is kind of an interesting situation. I wasn't actually planning on using this example, but it's actually a really good example because it works on so many levels. Buddhists do consider these images like that, and we don't just mistreat images like that. You don't put an image like this on the floor. You don't put it in certain place. You don't put it like in your bathroom. You put it in a clean place. You look after it. You respect it. Give an example. So just recently, a friend was sharing some pictures on Facebook of more forest fires in California, and then there's the Tasajara Zen Center, and they've got a lot of statues of the Buddha. They're not very big, fairly smallish, and the fires are coming through, and they're afraid that the fires are going to burn down their monastery, including the images. So they take them out, they do a service, like a ritual, they wrap them up and they bury them because they need to evacuate, and then if they come back later they can recover them and they'll be safe. But they do like a whole ritual for those things. Now, in terms of being a Buddhist, there are definitely some good positive things about having that mentality of like seeing an image or a representation of the Buddha. It generates respect. It generates this very like wholesome state of mind within us. But then again, at the same time, if that was to lead us to generate an unwholesome state, so if we see somebody, if we see somebody like blowing up those Bamiyan statues of the Buddha, remember those? Are they like Pakistan or Afghanistan? Afghanistan, I think, that were destroyed quite a few years ago now by various non-Buddhist groups. And if we then feel anger and aversion, right? I'm like, oh, how could those beep, beep, beep people do that? I want to go in there and punch them on the nose. Question, do you really think the Buddha is like, yeah, man, it's good to like beat those guys up? Do you really think the Buddha would be into that? I'm going to say quite confidently the Buddha would not be. If that conceptualization, so like this is an image of the Buddha, I'm a Buddhist, note that I'm a Buddhist, therefore I need to protect this thing. Okay, wholesome so far. People who do damage to it, I should beat them up or hurt them. Hey, my mind's already slipping into this unwholesome state of mind, right? Created an affliction based around the sense of I, a sense of me. If I was not a Buddhist, they rip it up, oh well. And they ripped it up, like, maybe they own it. Oh, they can do whatever they like to it, they own it. It doesn't really bother me too much. So that affliction's come about due to my own creation of self-centered views. You can even see this, like this particular example, from the Buddha's time himself. So the Buddha's disciples would sometimes go begging for their alms food down in the towns, in the villages. And sometimes, like early in the morning, there'd be the other non-Buddhist, called shamanas, so the other non-Buddhist religious practitioners. And they would apparently sit around in the parks all morning and argue about religion, right? Who's right, who's wrong, etc., etc. You can imagine it. And sometimes they would be saying things very critical about the Buddha, and sometimes the Buddha's disciples would hear that and they'd get really upset and agitated, and they go tell the Buddha, and the Buddha's just like, listen to what they say. Like if what they're saying is true and it's a criticism, then we need to reflect on what we're doing and like improve ourselves. If what they're saying is not true, why should we get upset? Because they're saying things that are not true. So basically the Buddha is then moving them into a way like, don't get attached to your own religious identity. If that religious identity is in turn letting us create afflictions. It's a very powerful idea, you know. It's a very powerful idea. It's kind of, I was still going to put this category in kind of like the bit more advanced Buddhist practice. Sometimes people, yeah, and it's a lot like kind of some Zen sayings, for example. I feel I'm going a bit off track today. That's interesting. You know, you hear these Zen stories about like, you know, in the wintertime in the monastery and they're all freezing, and then the monk goes in and he gets the little wooden Buddha statues and he throws them in the fire. And then another monk comes and says, "What are you doing? You're burning the Buddha." You know, and he gets upset about it. And he says, you know, and he says in turn, you know, does the statue have Buddha nature? He says, you know, oh no, he says, I'm burning it so I can get relics. You know, like, so when the Buddha or other like saints would die and they would cremate the body, they would get these relics, kind of like crystals and things like that, form out of the physical remains. And these are worshipped. This is what they originally put in the stupas, in the stupas or the pagodas. And he says, well, if I burn this wooden Buddha that I threw in the fire, am I going to get any relics out of it? And he says, of course you're not. He says, well, if I'm not, just put another one in the fire. He's kind of pointing out that, like, look, it's just a piece of wood and we're cold. We need warmth to look after ourselves, right? It's just a piece of wood. Don't be attached to it. But we create these identity views around things. Okay. Like I said, I kind of got a little bit off topic. Let's go back and look at this process again, but maybe in a slightly more simple way, simple example. So I don't know. Does anyone want to throw me an example? What's some object of your desire or aversion that you have been struggling with lately? What's an object of desire or aversion that you have been struggling with lately? Somebody jump in and throw me an example. Okay. I can think of lots. I mean, there's just too many of them, really. Who's gonna give me one? I know there's a bit of a delay between me asking and you typing and it coming out my side, but we'll just think of an interesting example to kind of work through. And maybe we can also get an example where we can talk about the way I've been referring to these is kind of like oh, sorry, I need to flip back onto the screen. Kind of talking about this process as though the sense that the afflictions of desire and aversion from sensation and the afflictions of self-centered views from perception are like two separate things, but they're not. They're not. Okay, do we have an example? Job. Okay, what's your job, Jonathan? Let's say you're applying for a job. Okay, let's say applying for jobs. Okay, so now of course this example, I mean, this is good. It's like a real example. It's not like a case of like a single object, like it's something you see. It's a much more complex thing, but it will still work for an example. So we've got this kind of particular job in mind that we're trying to get. We have a cognition of this job. Now, we might think that this job is going to give us various types of sensations. So maybe it's just a job that we like doing. I don't know, Jonathan, have you thrown out what job you've got? Mika's got big computers. Okay. Maybe a job with big computers. How about that? I don't know if that's your job, Jonathan, but can we work with that? You really like computers, big computers. You want to work in, you want to work with like a big supercomputer. I remember as an engineering undergrad, we had these cool silicon graphics machines in the engineering, our robotics lab. Woo! I feel like, oh man, I want one of those. They're so cool. Like for those time, like the graphics on those things were amazing. And nowadays our cell phones are probably more powerful. Anyway, so you've got that idea, and so there's the fun part of working with these big computers. It's just fun. You can do all these cool things. So you got kind of nice sensations, and it creates this kind of desire, right? Kind of a desire for having that kind of job and working with those kinds of things. But you might also have some other things as well. It might be, you might then start creating this image that like, oh, I have this job and I work with the biggest computers. Like, I don't just work with crappy little computers, I work with these awesome computers. So then you start to create, your job becomes part of your identity. That's a good example. Jobs and identity closely intertwined, So you have then this perception of this job as part of your identity, right? You work with these computers, it's part of who you are, and that starts to kind of formalize itself in place as well. And both of these then are parts of our intention. Now, how is that going to then affect our physical and verbal actions? Okay, so you might go to other places that have big computers and you want to play around with their big computers as well. We might also start to have like the aversion towards smaller ones. Somebody might say, oh, do you want to come and work on this some other job in some other place with like little puny computers? And we might think that like, too puny, it's just not as fun. The functions on this thing are crap. The speed, it's so slow. I can barely use it. I have to, you remember when you used to have to wait for like minutes, like 5-10 minutes, an hour to like download something from the internet, back like 20 years ago. And now if we have to wait for more than like 5 seconds to like download like a whole gigabyte, we get upset. Could be kind of thing, right? We're then comparing. So we might then have aversion to less powerful machines. We look down on them. We're creating this then for the view side, for the like conceptual side. We then start to generate this concept of myself as somebody who works with this computer. We might generate pride based on that. We might be really like proud of our CV that we can put on. 2019, 2020, worked with the MIT supercomputer. Yeah, isn't that cool? I'm so badass, I've got this experience. And then we might look down on other people, like, oh, that person only worked with a not so supercomputer. We might have jealousy for somebody else who, like, literally the people who design and build supercomputers, they don't just work with them, they design them. Oh, we're like envious of them. We meet these people, and because we look down on people that use regular computers, we then think that these people that design supercomputers look down on us, and we feel like all ashamed. Complex stuff going on. And that's, of course, going to affect then the way in which we speak and the way in which we act. And it's going to feed back into it. We might think like, oh, not powerful enough, I need a better job, right? I need to find an even more powerful computer. I need to get that engineering degree so I can go and design these computers. And then that we rearrange our life in order to get that further experience, intensify those sensations, strengthen those perceptions. And then this process is just further strengthening these sensations, these perceptions, the desires and aversions, the self-centered view, pride, jealousy, and so forth that come with them, we're getting in a loop that's constantly being strengthened. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so now I'm back to your comments here. So as Meg says, I mean, big computers, more power, more power. Yeah, right, exactly. Like you want something more powerful. And thinking like, oh, you know, I could do this, but if I had extra RAM, if I had bigger chip, if I had whatever, I could do more things, better things, right? Desire for more power. Or Jonathan's talking about IT high pay job. Okay, yeah, that might be part of it as well. So like, you know, the job, the pay, you know, how much we get paid for. Oh, Mika is a supercomputing specialist. Well, there we go. He's one of those guys that could have those afflictions. Light speed is too slow. Sure, I think we're like that in probably most of our jobs. Now, this is got an interesting example. Okay, we've got a comment here from GW. Related to earlier slide that stated we always view the world in relation to the self. What is the higher way to view the world in a Buddhist context? Is it like viewing myself and all things as empty of self-nature and just products of dependent co-arising? Yes, I think you've kind of answered your own question there. You know, so if we had the big job working with the supercomputers and getting the high pay and so forth, you know, we like to think of it as me. It's like, oh, me, I've got this best job because there are certain qualities that I have. These other people don't have these good jobs because they don't have those good qualities. I'm a genius. That's why I can work with supercomputers. Those people, they're not geniuses. That's why they have to, I don't know. To say something that people might find offensive, but if from an arrogant, and that's why they work in the Genius Bar and they sell iPhones. The Genius Bar, haha! They don't know the real geniuses. Me working with my giant supercomputer brain. Okay, so that's the way constructing it as but we can also look another way. Look, why do I have this job? I have this job in supercomputers because I had an earlier job working with computers, and I had an earlier job working with computers because I studied computer science at university, and I studied that because I went to a certain high school where we had a really good teacher who taught us computers, and my parents were really kind enough. They worked so hard that even when I was young and my parents weren't rich, they still brought me a computer because they thought it would be better for my education. That's not due to some innate quality of myself, you know. I had all these conditions that step by step by step led me to where I am. None of them were innate qualities of myself. In fact, many of them were totally nothing to do with myself. And maybe kind of maybe a number of other people, if they had those same conditions, could have developed in the same way to end up where I am. And maybe some of these other people that I look down on because they don't have that good job, they had adverse conditions that weren't entirely dependent upon themselves. They're empty, meaning they are not controlled by a self. We can't just decide how we want life to be. We can't just decide what things we want and they magically appear. Huge numbers, millions and billions of interacting conditions create every given moment and every given circumstance, and they can change too. So I've just talked about the dependent origination, which has led to where we are, but we can also keep in mind that those are impermanent and changeable. I might have this particular job working this way, but there's no guarantee that I can maintain that as well. There might be something might change where really quickly I can't do this job anymore, and then I'm going to lose that. Now, if I cling tightly to that, in terms of a self, I have this job because I'm a genius. I have these innate qualities that make me, that I should have this good job. Conditions change, and the next thing I know, I find myself, out of a job, can't find a job. What am I going to think then? Now, I think I'm a failure because I don't have a job. And I used to think that having this job was a measure of who I am and a measure of my qualities. And how many people think like this? So many people. We evaluate people on their jobs. We think that certain kind of jobs make people better people. Certain kind of jobs make people lesser people. And the Buddhist point of view is going to say, no, all of these things are conditioned. People might be in very good jobs and be ethically or morally scumbags. And some people might be in very lowly positions and they may be like the salt of the earth and the most lovely people you could ever imagine. And we don't have to think very hard to see those examples as well. How often do we see politicians who have so much power and status in society, and we think like these people, like some of them are just corrupt and unethical. Some of them are also very good, of course. And then we find somebody who might just be some person who's has a job cleaning people's homes, and it's a very low paying job, underappreciated, but they're like the most genuine, kind person. So by associating this kind of sense of self with these things, we create that kind of problem. And you're right, we need to see these things as empty of self-nature, meaning they're not intrinsically like that. They are like that due to different conditions and causes. So yes, GW, that would be my answer there. Okay, Mika says, only people who can install Linux are humans. I have installed Linux before. See, now even my response to this comment by Mika shows my ego coming out. I want to demonstrate that I'm human. I want you to think I'm somehow smarter because I've installed a Linux system. Didn't last long, I couldn't use it very well. That's such an immediate response. Okay, yeah, you're just playing along to the example. It's a good example, yeah. That's how people might think. And we often do that, like in our different jobs, or we become knowledgeable about something. Like, how can people not know this? Really? How can they not know? And everyone else is just thinking like, who needs to know that? That's totally irrelevant. They should know what I do, my job. We think what we do, what we know is important. What we don't know or what other people know is not important. Again, it's a self-centered view, and we can see very quickly how that can lead to all sorts of conflict, right? Okay, so a comment from Eric replying to GW, is there really a higher or lower way of viewing things, or just viewing? So higher and lower, of course, I mean, these are metaphorical. In human language, we very commonly use higher to indicate somehow better, lower to indicate worse. But maybe we can talk about use something like accuracy, or there are certain ways of looking at things that will reduce and eliminate suffering and dissatisfaction, because there are certain ways of looking at things that remove or eliminate afflictions. And there are certain ways of looking at things that increase our conflict and suffering and distress in the world. And basically what they are the way of looking at things that reduces it are when we're looking at it without these distortions of desire, aversion, ignorance, self-centered views. And when we do have ways of interacting with the world that are through desire and aversion and ignorance and self-centered views, it creates, we understand things wrong, and then we act in certain ways that actually bring about more suffering. And that's what we call lower. So I think we can kind of use these terms. I mean, you can also take a step back and say, and this is kind of important, but this is kind of like, we need to go through this process. We need to first understand, okay, if I see things in this kind of way, it's going to give me that result. If I see things in this way, it's going to lead to this result. If I'm very clingy, very self-centered, it will cause me distress. If I'm not, it will reduce my distress. But I also need to be careful. Now, what can often happen here? We kind of get the example of what we might call like a religious ego. So I think we can kind of say, yeah, it's better to be kind and generous than it is to be selfish and nasty. But we don't want to be kind and generous and overly proud of that, such that we look down on people that are nasty and self-centered. Because if we're proud of being good, that is not such a good thing. So we kind of, I like to think of it like two ways. in one way, we need to like work on developing the wholesome and positive. We do need to see clearly this kind of causal relationship. But once we've taken this path of trying to eliminate self-view and trying not to be overcome by desire and aversion, we also need to make sure that we don't generate a self-view that I'm a good person, I'm a nice guy, or I'm a nice girl. That guy is nasty and bad. They're inferior. That girl, oh, she's, and just criticizing other, because then that is just another self-view that we've added on top, and that can definitely happen. That can definitely happen. And I'd say even to the point of the further we develop ourselves in a good way, the more we need to be aware of developing that kind of potential religious ego, or there's a term actually by the great modern Tibetan master Chogyam Trungpa. He called it spiritual materialism. It's where we take all our spiritual lifestyle and we turn that into another kind of ego. So that's what he was meaning, like ego kind of materialism. We turn it into something. Oh, I've been to this many retreats, and oh, I saw Master so and so, and I, and you do encounter people like that. And I can say for myself, there are some people like that kind of collect up all their good deeds and all their spiritual practices and really like to talk about it and show off about it. Do it myself. And so that is, it's kind of like trying to think of a good metaphor. It's like we're on the right path, but then we've even turned that into something bad. So this is why, in a lot of Buddhist practice, we need to have the good views and the wholesome actions, but we also need to have that selflessness as well. To constantly make sure that we don't get attached to the good that we have done. Okay, one more comment there from Mika. My teacher has talked about artificial Buddhist personality. Yeah, sure, some people can do that. Sometimes the worst ones are, and I've totally done this myself. Notice in past tense kind of implies that I don't do it anymore. I totally do this myself. You see it like people that are kind of like new converts to a religion. Often the new converts are the most like zealous, and always kind of want to be so orthodox and strict. Often it's because they're trying to fit in with a new group and create a new identity, and they've got like this kind of this idea, this concept of what that should be, and they're trying to make themselves fit into it, or at least make other people think that they fit into it. And then you get kind of the long-term practitioner who has fitted into it naturally, but doesn't feel that they have to kind of show it off. They don't. It's not artificial. There's some good statements like this in the Chan school or the Zen school, which is sort of like the beginners all try to look very Chan or very Zen, but like a real Zen master, a real Chan master, they don't. Yeah, they're so Zen you don't even notice that they're Zen. They're not. Somebody's just talking about Zen all the time to make you think that they're really into Zen. Then they're not very Zen. They just do it. That's just it's just kind of how they will naturally behave without an ego attached to it. So it's something we've got to keep in mind. Okay, now we've gone a little bit off topic, but actually, I don't know, maybe we haven't. Maybe we've kind of been on topic all along. Let's go back. There might have been something else in this PowerPoint in here. Oh yeah, it was basically just saying when these afflictions strengthen, then they're not just mental afflictions, so it's not just mental desire or aversion or ego. They manifest as external actions, the things we do, the things that we say. So a basic Buddhist classification of karma: mental karma, physical karma, and verbal karma. A lot of these actions are either seeking pleasure or avoiding pain, and also seeking to protect this me and mine. Now I was going to talk a bit more about the actual connection between these, but our time is already like 10 o'clock. Somebody remind me, next week, I want to talk in a bit more detail about the connection between the emotional afflictions and the conceptual or self-centered afflictions. Because the way you might think of it at the moment, they seem, okay, they're both afflictions, but one stems from sensations, one stems from concepts. But these two do interrelate totally, and they also mutually reinforce each other. And just another final note, Buddhism does emphasize the mental actions. We ultimately have to change this on the mental level, but we do also need to work on the external level. It's not enough to just say like, oh, because I don't have any mental, aversion or desire, therefore I can behave in any way I like. And some people do say this as a justification for doing all sorts of bad deeds. But no, if we've really got to work on the mental level, and that in turn will change the external behavior. So we can maybe wrap up a little bit more about this next week. And next week we're going to be getting into the storehouse consciousness, so the kind of the deep levels of the unconscious mind. And so we can talk a little bit more about that then. Okay, for now, it's time for us to get into some stretches in a minute. I don't know, did we have any? Okay, just a little comment there from GW. Thanks for answering our questions. I appreciate these classes. You're welcome. This is what we're here for, discuss things. I learn new things, and sometimes it confirms my understanding of the Dharma. Good. I'm glad you are getting something of value out of it. Thanks for joining us. Okay, now we're going to flip into stretch time, and I need to move this camera down. And I need like a remote, like a button, and it goes like automated system. That'd be so cool. We're now going to do some stretches in a minute and do some sitting meditation. And, I know the numbers viewing now suddenly drop down. It's like, it's just so boring, tune out. But you can stick around. We've got 10 minutes at the end where we'll do a little Q&A. Okay. Make sure your legs aren't too numb when you stand up. Okay, some real basic stretches. We're going to do ankles, knees, hips, and spine. Back the other way. Remember to put your awareness into the body part you're stretching, part of your mindfulness. Go down with the knees. And we're going to be, you can use any meditation technique you want to use in a minute. If you just want to use your breath, that's fine. And of course, some of these ideas that we've been talking about in the class are going to slowly percolate through your thinking. And just don't follow them. Don't just get caught up in thinking about it. Continue with your breath, or continue with your practice. And these concepts will, when the mind gets into that meditative state and it kind of breaks down those thinking lines and thinking complexes in the mind, but it also then enables the mind to reintegrate what you've learnt in a more organic way. You're not forcing it in by just thinking about it or just reading about it, but by bringing your mind down to that deeper level, it brings in those things and it reintegrates it. So when we're meditating, just do your meditation practice. If some of the thoughts from the class come into your mind, that's okay, but don't follow them. Let them naturally work their way in, and then you'll find you will have a deeper understanding of them. Okay? This is like the shortest, fastest stretch ever, because time is already getting long. Okay, exhaling down, stretching up, breathing in, exhaling down, inhaling in, inhaling up, and exhaling down. Okay, a little bit for the neck. Okay, if you've got a cushion, get yourself ready. Yes, kind of in the middle of the camera there. Make sure you're comfy, whichever posture you're using, it's all okay. Remember, the key thing for your posture is Try to be able to sit, hopefully so your hips are a little higher than your knees, so that your pelvis here can sit up straight and not slouch back. So you want your pelvis forward. Hopefully it can sit there forward without you having to force it. Then your body back up nice and straight. There'll be that gentle curve in your lower back. Your hands you can place wherever you like, maybe in your lap, on your knees. I go preferably palms down. Keep your energies in rather than your energies out and your energy dissipating, which will make your mind diffuse. If it's down, keeps energies in, or hands together keeps energy in and focused more. Relax your shoulders, head, neck up straight. You'd probably take off your glasses and what other things. Keep mine on so we can look at the time. Take a couple of nice deep full breaths. Okay, we'll begin our session. So mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in and mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. If the mind starts to wander or be distracted, that's going to happen. Just bring it back to the breath. You might want to locate your breath or your observation, mindfulness of the breath at your nostrils. You can feel the air just here in your nostrils and your top lip. Or you might feel the expansion, contraction of the chest. It's not forcing it. Or you might feel it lower down in the abdomen, just the gentle rise and fall of the abdomen. You can put it kind of just below your belly button, like about on your belt line. So the contact of the air with the nostrils, rise and fall of the chest, rise and fall of the lower abdomen. But whichever one we're using, we're just going to mindfully breathe in, mindfully breathe out. And we can be aware when we are breathing in, if it's a short breath or a long breath. We're going to maintain our good posture. Relaxed but upright. And we can also mindfully breathe in, aware of the body. And as we progress, mindfully breathing in, relaxing the body. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. If you're distracted, your mind wanders. As soon as you notice, just bring it back to the breath. Nice and patient. Don't get too annoyed with yourself if your mind wanders. It's going to happen. Main question is whether or not we're bringing it back to the breath rather than worrying that it has wandered off in the first place. Mindfully breathing in, aware of the body. Mindfully breathing out, aware of the body. Mindfully breathing in, relaxing the body. Mindfully breathing out, relaxing the body. breathing in and mindfully breathing out. And you don't have to worry about past breath or future breath. Just focus on this present breath before you. You just have to do one breath. Just this one right now. Nice deep full breath in. Slowly exhale all the way out. Bring your awareness into your body. You can just slowly rock your body left and right. Roll your shoulders. Stretch your neck. Open your hands. Breath in, exhale forward, over the left leg, stretching the right side, over your right leg, stretching the left side, back to the center, up, breathing in, stretch up with your arms, expand your chest, and warm up the palms. Cover over your eyes, massage around your eyes, your forehead, temples, your cheeks, whole face. Massage your ears from top to bottom, and the back of your head and neck, shoulders. Chest, sides, arms, and finally your lower back. Okay. slowly unfold your legs, and then if you need to do any massage for your legs, you can do so. Just due to time constraints, I'm just going to leave it there. I don't get numbness in my legs anymore. Haven't got numbness in my legs for a long time, so I don't need that, but you can do that while I flip back to the other camera. Here we go, back to this camera here. There we go. Okay, how's everyone doing out there? Okay, hope you're all doing well and feeling good after that little session. Okay, just then I think I have something in my eye. Okay, so this is just our usual kind of short meditation session, using the breath, the body, as we've talked about in the previous course. It's just really good for just calming the body and the mind, and also, you know, through calming the body we can release stress, but through calming the mind we can also release it as well. These two work together very nicely, and the breath is a really amazing tool for kind of connecting just the physical body, but also with kind of the emotional body and the thinking body, shall we say. If you're more interested in learning about those breath meditations, just go through the various videos that we've got on the Bodhi tree page here, and you'll find some previous courses. We do one mindfulness meditation, should be classes 1 to 6, and also Karma to Insight, study and practice, classes 1 to 8. You can check those out as well if you'd like to learn more. Okay, for now though, time is drawing near, and so maybe we can kind of begin to wrap up. If you've got any comments, just feel free to throw out those comments for now. I'll just maybe give a little review of what we covered today. So mainly first week 1, we talked about in particular the 5 aggregates, this way of looking at ourselves and not just saying like that's just me, but looking at, hey, there's this physical part, there's my body, I have feelings, I have sensations, I have thoughts and concepts, I have emotions, I also have this kind of awareness. My senses enable me to be aware of my environment, and these are all different aspects. And then in week 2 we talked about kind of how they related together. They are, in a way, they're distinct things, but they influence one another. In particular, from our physical body, includes our physical senses. We can then perceive the world, and along with those perceptions come different feelings and sensations and different thoughts and emotional responses. And then today we looked in particular how sometimes those responses that we have to the world are not always so good. They can include this desire and aversion. They can include a lot of self-centeredness in the way in which we conceptualize the world. We're always looking at things in terms of me. What does it have to do with me? If it's to do with me, I'm interested. If it doesn't, I don't care. That's how often we look at it. But that can be one of the causes for a lot of the distress that we feel. And so next week, we're going to go and look at what we might call the unconscious mind, in particular the teaching of the alaya vijnana, the storehouse or store consciousness, as it's often translated in English, and see how that is kind of the place where all these potentials are kind of stored. So today we talked about like the emotions, these afflictions are potentials, and we've talked about how they come out and how they manifest, but like what about when they're not manifesting, and how do those potentials get in there in the first place? So we're going to look at then the unconscious mind, and talk about that for next week's class. Okay, so if you're interested in that, come along and tune in. Comment from Eric there, thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in and joining us. Having said all that, and looking at the time, maybe it's time we flip on over and do our dedication of merit to wrap it up. Oh, that reminds me, I forgot to do the 3 invocations to Shakyamuni Buddha at the start of today's class. Maybe we should do that now. I know it seems a bit silly putting it at the end, but better late than never. Okay, so I should pop up now the dedication of merit. Before we begin this, let's just join our palms and do the 3 invocations to Shakyamuni Buddha. So Namo Ben Si Sijia Moni Fo, Namo Ben Si Sijia Moni Fo, Namo Ben Si Sijia Moni Fo. So remember that is like respect or salutations to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. And let us now at the end of class wrap it up with the 3 refuges. So again, if you'd like to join palms, and we'll just read together. I go to the Buddha for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall realize the great path and aspire to the supreme state of mind. I go to the Dharma for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall deeply enter the collection of teachings and attain wisdom like the ocean. I go to the Sangha for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall unite and lead the community in harmony without any hindrance. Okay, everyone, thank you very much for tuning in. Good to see you, good to talk with you, interact with you. I hope this has been beneficial, and I hope it sets you up for the start of a lovely weekend. So take care, keep a good heart, and we'll be seeing you all back again next week. Okay, bye bye.